2026, I continue a conversation where we talk about all types of different topics, from race, religion, current events, everything that you can think of. This is that opportunity for you to be able to join in on a conversation and talk about some things. So we can come to some conclusions. And so I encourage you, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to type your questions and your comments into the comment section. As you type them in, they'll come up. We will review them. We will discuss it, and it'll be a part of the conversation. So if you have something that you want to say, I agree, I disagree, or think about this, or whatever you want to put out there on the comment section, we will bring it up onto the screen. As always, I like to remind people of the other offerings that we have going on here. On Thursdays, we have Thursday Thirst. That's our weekly Bible study. That's at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's on Facebook and YouTube. Please feel free to join us. On Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a time of worship. And that is also on Facebook, YouTube, and it's in person. And then on Tuesdays, that's today, we have a time of prayer at 7 o'clock, from 7 to 7:45. You don't have to pray the whole entire time. But between 7 to 7:45, some type of prayer should be going on. And if it is, you will be praying with the people of this ministry. All right? So those are the offers that we have out here. So as always, kind of like to just jump right in, other than letting you know what else is going on. We kind of jump right into our topics. There's a lot. There's always a lot going on and a lot to choose from. We can get bogged down a lot of times sticking in if we talk about government and politics and things that are going on. We can talk about those all the time, every day. We can also talk about current events. That's something that we can talk about all the time and every day. But not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about kind of like a weird little side issue, and it's parenting. All right, so we're talking about parenting, but in the realm of assistance that comes from organizations, so from the government, from churches, from the village that's supposed to raise people. All right, and so this is why it's come up. We've talked about this before, but there's a lot of governments right now in a lot of different countries who are deciding on limiting the amount of time that kids can get on the internet, or the places that kids can go, or the type of things that they can do. For example, in multiple countries now, they have now restricted social media from people who are under the age of 18, so that they have to use age verification in order to be able to get onto these sites. And they're also, in some countries, they're blocking certain social media sites because they recognize it as a national health problem in these countries. And so a health epidemic. And so for the sake of the people who are 18 and younger, because of all the negative things that can happen with the internet, all the negative things that can happen with social media, whether it be being exposed to topics and being exposed to things that they shouldn't be exposed to, or whether it be cyberbullying, or whether it be being preyed upon by adults or people with bad intentions, whatever it may be, or the addiction aspect of it, whatever it may be, they are now restricting in a lot of countries what kids can do. Here in the United States, they've been discussing restricting certain things in certain aspects. Also, in certain states, they've restricted certain type of sites, whether it be gambling sites or adult sites where they have adult content, where now they're trying to make it so that through the use of their age verifications and other little tactics, where they're reducing the ability of kids to be able to get access to certain things. All right. And so that's starting to go on, and there's a lot of discussions. Even now with AI, more and more discussions are coming out. So the conversation is not, should they do specific, let's do this with social media, let's do that. The conversation that has started to creep up is, what is the role and responsibility of everybody else when it comes to you and your kids? Or you and your grandkids, or you and your nephew and niece, or you and the neighborhood kids. We've gone down this path, especially my generation, I talk about, where there's a lot of parents who say, don't talk to my kids, I'm here by myself, I'm the one who's supposed to manage my kids and do this, and if I think something is okay, it's okay. If I think something is bad, it's bad. I'm taking care of my kids. And they reject a lot of other people's advice. They reject other people's criticism, warnings. They don't reject people's praise and accolades and all that kind of stuff that they give you for taking care of your kids. But people kind of reject a lot of just any kind of input, assistance, anything at all. And so we've gotten to a spot where now governments have decided to get involved and to restrict what can and cannot be done by the kids. So kind of overstepping the parents, because some parents are just gonna let their kids do whatever, and some are not. And so the question is, what's the role? And I look more, kind of at the church as well. Like, what's the role of how much, in other organizations, how much should we be telling people what to do with their kids, or just telling people what to do with the kids that they are in charge of. And I want to be clear about that, because we know there's a lot of grandparents that raise kids. We know that there's a lot of nieces and nephews, sisters and brothers sometimes that raise kids. We know it's not just parents, so we know it's a lot of different people who raise kids. And it's a difficult task sometimes, and you got different levels of people who pay attention to these kids. And so as the in the corporate sense, as the government or organizations, should we be stepping in and telling people and telling kids, or kind of managing what they can and cannot do? And so we look at it from the point of, you always look at it from the point, well, you should always look at it starting from the point of harm. If the parents are going to let kids do stuff that can potentially harm themselves, just because the parents are okay with it or not paying attention to it, should you allow the kids to harm themselves? For example, right now there's a debate, and I know this kind of gets into a weird zone, but there's a debate about surgeries. Kids being able to make decisions about changing their bodies. From something as small as a nose job or a tattoo to something as big as changing their genders, or really changing the major surgeries where they're changing how they look. Significant, especially for women. Augmentation surgeries and really changing how they look at a young age. And so, should the government step in and say no? As churches, should we step in? When we're talking about people and kind of just making and saying no, and saying that people shouldn't do this and kids shouldn't do this, and really kind of jumping in on parents and their responsibilities. And so that's kind of the trend of what's going on. The discussion part of what's going on is, what's the role of outside organizations in parenting? Again, a lot of people and parents, especially my generation, they don't want anybody telling them anything. They think whatever they decide is it, and whatever the consequences are for their decisions that their kid has to pay for, that's nobody else's business but theirs. And so, unfortunately, what that means is, if you have some bad ideas and your kids have to pay a price, then they just have to pay the price, because you won't listen to anybody else, and nobody else can come in and kind of help you out in that situation. And so, yeah, as a community, as churches, as government, should we step in sometimes and just say, all right, well, you want to let your kids be on social media, and have free reign. But as a government, we're going to say no, they can't. There's age verification. Or yeah, you want your kid to be able to, stay out all hours of the night, but no, as a government, we're going to put a curfew. Or you want to have your kids spending the night at somebody else's house of the opposite sex, so girls and boys having joint sleepovers. But as a church, we sit back and we say, well, look, that's not appropriate. That's not what we do, and that's not what you should be doing if you're in connection and relationship with us. Where does that line step, and where do we go with that comment? There should be restrictions, particularly for young people, on what they can be involved in. Some parents, unfortunately, who are great parents, some because they weren't raised responsibly. Should your 13-year-old be able to join the Army and go to war? Should they be able to decide to have children? Yeah. And those are the questions. Those are the restrictions. Those are the things that I think a lot of the restriction conversations we should have. And then it happens different in different places. Of course, the marriage one. All of the states here in the United States, with the exception of 3, California, Mississippi, and one other one I can't think. I think it may be Arkansas or Alabama. It's one that starts with an A, which is a lot of states that start with an A. But all the states except for those 3 have outlawed marriage, I think 13 or younger. Those are the only ones that are still allowed when it's 13 or younger. That's one of those, we're stepping in and saying, all right, we're not going to allow you just to do whatever you want to do. So even if people come from a different country and everything like that, all of these other states still don't allow. There's so that's an example based on there of where, at the end of the day, everybody in the family may be fine with it, the girl may be fine with it, the adults may be fine with it. They don't allow that. And that's kind of stepping over in the boundary. Same thing and that's why we're going back to churches. Churches have decisions to make what we're going to allow. Are we going to allow somebody who's 13 to come in and get married to somebody else, to a grown adult, because that's culturally what they do in their country and they want to use our building? No. And not only do we tell them no, like, that's not right. That's not what we do here. Those are the questions of how do we protect? Where is the boundary of protecting kids? Where is the boundary of protecting kids? We're overstepping the parents' responsibility, because parents may agree or disagree. It doesn't matter. This is what the rule is, or this is how we're going to speak out against it. Even God has restrictions. Thou shalt not. Yeah, and there it goes. We have restrictions, and we should have restrictions. Even God has restrictions. Now, at the same time, I'll tell you, I sit back here. There's this popular trend amongst, I guess, church groups where they have their own insurance. There's some church organizations who have their own insurance, health insurance. And the reason that they have their own health insurance is, one, it's a way to kind of save some money, because it does help save a little money sometimes. But another thing is they want to have restrictions. They want to restrict what people can do. So they want to offer health coverage, but you can't. They want to make sure that they have restrictions on your reproductive rights. They want to make sure that they have restrictions on what elective cosmetic type surgeries and things like that you can get. They want to have restrictions on in those particular type of areas where you can pay and you can have health care, but we're not going to pay for everything. Our health care is only going to be really restrictive. Now, that sounds great. For me, I'm 100% against it, because it sounds great until it doesn't. Because sometimes when we have these restrictions and we get on board, we don't have a clue what's going to happen in the future. You sit back here and you get with a church-based or faith-based healthcare program where they say they're going to have restrictions and they don't want gender-affirming care. And then you have somebody who's born with a weird chromosomal issue where they need gender-affirming care. to correct the chromosomal issue. But you don't allow that because you have ideas about other things, but you couldn't foresee all of the different types of situations and scenarios that may be going on. Or a child who's born with more reproductive parts than they need, and so they need to remove the ones that may be dangerous, but you didn't put that in because you call that gender affirming care. Or you're sitting back and a child may need some type of cosmetic surgery, elective surgery, because of some kind of condition or whatever that they may have. But you kind of put that out and said, well, you can't have, for example, you can't have breast augmentation surgery because we didn't include that in ours because we thought that was wrong. But yet a child may need that because of an injury or something like that occurred. So I don't like it when we kind of cross over, we have too many restrictions because, again, you don't know everything that could possibly happen. And so that's where it comes conflicted for me sometimes. When I sit back and you say, well, we don't want to let kids do social media or certain things. We don't know how does that affect somebody's life. In most scenarios, it may seem great, but in what scenario is it not great? Where they may need that type of connection, where they may need to connect with somebody who's far away, but now they can't because they can't log into certain sites and do all of these things. I think we always have to be careful with kind of overstepping that line of being restrictive. Now, unless it's something, like for example, I like the comment that was made. If it's something that's in the Bible as a church, and as a church we're against it, then I think, yes, we need to say that we're against it. I don't think churches should provide health care. I think that's not great because health care, you get into a whole bunch of different things, especially the fact that all families aren't the same. And so if at the end of the day, the father and the mother who may be paying money into the healthcare system may be Christians and the kids are not, and they have different ideas about what they need to be doing with their bodies and their healthcare, I don't think it should be restrictive on them. Or if one spouse is, with the faith and another spouse is with a different faith and they have different thoughts on their healthcare, I don't know whether or not the church should be involved in healthcare. It should be supportive. We have supplemental things where we can support people's health, but I don't know whether or not we should be making those type of decisions. But I think as a group, as a whole, as a society, we got to be careful on those restrictions. We're restricting what kids can do, what people can do, based on our feelings, because our feelings don't necessarily address every situation. I'll give an example. I've given this example before, and I'm going to give it again. I don't think that kids should be able to make a decision about their sexual identity, their physical sexual identity, so with their body. They can't have gender-affirming surgery. So you can't cut anything off or add anything. I don't think you should be able to do that as a kid until you're the legal adult age of 18. I firmly disagree with that. I don't think they should have it. However, I don't think you should have a law or a formal restriction that stops kids from doing it. Because if they sit there with them and their doctor and everything like that, have a conversation. And the reason is I don't know all of the different reasons that somebody would need gender affirming care. I am not a doctor. There could be a bunch of different reasons that don't have to do with their identity or just being like, hey, if you're a boy and you want to transition into a girl, or a girl and you want to transition to a boy, it may have nothing to do with that. It may have something to do with something totally different, a medical issue, a life or death issue. And so if you add that restriction, as much as I sit back and I say I don't like that, I think we need a restriction to restrict it to 18. At the same time, I say we don't need any kind of restriction because you just don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so I use that to kind of color how I think about things, because we don't need to put in things into place or restrictions into place without really knowing all of the different permutations of what can happen. And so it's real dangerous. You should rarely use like just blanket restrictions. And so, you know, as a society, as a community, when we sit back and we talk about restrictions and we talk about all these new rules that are being considered, all these new ways to keep children safe, because we know that there's a lot of children out here who have parents who are just not equipped to be able to keep them safe all the time from some of the dangers and the harms out here. As we think about how we protect kids and how we keep them safe from especially the rise in technology, we just have to remember that every time we look at a restriction, we got to really get deep and think about other types of people. Not just yourself, not just what we're doing, but you got to think about what other people are doing. Got to do research and kind of see, you know, what are all of the possibilities that can happen with restrictions. And as much as research, we can't anticipate every single scenario and every single situation. And that's why we should stay as far away from restricting as possible. And go on the education side. Let's just educate as much as we can. And every once in a while do a restriction, but we need to educate people as much as we can. As a church, we need to let people know right and wrong. But we don't need to be restricting so much right and wrong. As a government, they're more so, their job is more so to kind of put in some legal restrictions. But even there, they should be more about educating people what's on right and wrong versus restricting people with right and wrong. It sounds like a little freedom rate, but it's not. It's just, we got to be careful. Well, we have to be careful. And as much as we want to protect kids who have parents out here, kids who have guardians out here who are just really kind of just super relaxed on what they're doing, and we feel like they're not really protecting the kids, we have to make sure we set up other mechanisms to kind of help them out. That's why kids should be coming to church. That's why kids should be going to other organizations and things like that, so they can get exposed to different adults who can kind of help them along the way in the spots where parents may drop the ball or are blind spots, all the gaps that different people have because of whatever. They maybe too busy, they may have some, if it's grandparents or great parents, grandparents or great grandparents who are watching kids and they can't keep up with them or don't have the capacity, energy, whatever. That's our job, I think, as churches, as organizations, to just fill in the gaps, even schools, to fill in the gaps, but not do restrictions as much. Restrictions make me nervous. And so, yeah. Well, that's it. Not, nothing too deep today. But that is one of the topics that's going on across the world. This is not a local thing, it's across the world. It's how do we adjust to our changing society? And how do we adjust to be able to protect younger people from some of the dangers that are out here? Because more so than ever before, and every year going forward, kids will have more access, more exposure than they've ever had. They have the ability to see things and experience things that we, people who are my age and older, never could even have imagined at young ages. They have the internet, they have AI, they have social media, they have everything that they can just grab all this stuff up. And so, as society, we have to have a rush to kind of protect our kids from some of the dangers out there. We just got to do it the right way and in a smart way. And as a church, I think our job is so much more important because we can influence without mandating. We can influence very well without going into somebody's house and being like, you can't do this, or we'll do a law. I think we can influence well by being great examples and by connecting more so with kids and kind of keeping them away from some of that stuff. Or even if they get exposed to some of those things, kind of explaining what's going on and kind of helping them out there. And so that's basically it. So no, kind of quick today, a little early, but that's what I believe we should be doing. All right. With that being said, I'm gonna remind you again that we have weekly Bible study, Thursday, It's on Thursdays at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Facebook and YouTube, please join us. On Sundays, we have worship, Sunday worship at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Facebook, YouTube, and in person at the address that's on your screen. So if you're in the local area, please feel free to drop by. And on Tuesdays at 7 to 7:45, we have a time of prayer. And so please pray with the ministry, with us in the ministry. If you have any prayer concerns or anything like that, you can either you can send an email to us. You can call the number that you see on your screen. You can leave a message and let us know what's going on. And we will pray as you pray. Oh, and had another comment, so I'm going to get to that. In African tradition, we claim that it takes a village to raise a child. This, I believe, assures that not only is the child cared for, but also the village in which the child has grown up. Yeah, and we always, especially as church families and people of color, so these two groups, we have to remind ourselves of that it does take a village, and as parents, grandparents, caretakers, uncles, aunts, whatever, we have to remember and remind others that it does take a village, which means you have to take some of your pride and your arrogance off of you. You don't know everything, and other people should be able to put input into how your kids are brought up. They should be able to pour in positive things to your kids as well, but they should also be able to. It's a discussion point. You don't know everything, and so you out here, getting offended every time somebody says something to you. Hey, your kids are doing such and such and such, and I tell them that we can't do that, or I had to let them know that that's not how we do it. Can't get offended and mad every time somebody says something, because it doesn't mean you're any less or anything like that. But it does mean that they care about your kids and they care about community and the village that it takes to raise. So yeah, I think that's one of the major things is more than restricting. It's about each individual caretaker, guardian, parent, whatever, making sure that they allow others to participate in the process, because it does. It takes a village. It takes a village. I think that's a great comment. That's really how it should be. Yeah. All right, that was a good comment. All right, and with that, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the comments, and feel free to come back and join us again.